Hi, it's Jerry Roberts, and welcome to another edition of Newsmakers. It is Friday, September 23rd. I am joining you from our Maui Bureau. Nick Welsh is somewhere out in the ether, but fortunately, I am joined by my friend and colleague, Josh Molina. And if Nick shows up, we'll beam him in too. But we're going to do a Three Amigos show because it is only 6 weeks until the midterm election. So lots to talk about that. Josh, the independent endorsements came on, and we've talked previously how that can be important. No big surprises. Salud, Greg, James Kiriakou, but it did surprise me they endorsed Luz Reyes Martin over Roger Aceves for Goleta Council because they've long and I believe supported Roger. But were you surprised by that one?
Not really surprised. I think that Luce, as they explained in their editorial, is a rising star, and she's very much well liked within the Democratic Party, and she's very smart, and she does a lot of work within the community. So I think that I'm not really surprised there. It's a tough call because Roger's one of those people who he's a Democrat, he's Latino, Spanish speaking, and he was the first Latino ever
Ex-cop,
elected,
right?
ex-cop, and he's moderate. He's definitely, he toys around with the conservatives and the business community in a way that Luce would not do. But you could argue that he's a good council member, that he's exactly what part of what Goleta needs is just that perspective because he's not an activist. He's not somebody who's going to be talking about national issues. However, he does have some things that are negatives, as Nick Welsh points out often. He has accepted oil money when he was running for county supervisor, and locally, that's a big environmental no-no. So I think that I'm not really surprised they went with Luce. I think they acknowledged that Roger was formidable, but it feels as though Luce is going to have the upper hand in this. This endorsement is significant. The Indies endorsements are, and in a small race like this, every little bit helps.
Yeah, and I mean, Roger was basically the only more or less pro-business guy on that council. No, is there? I mean, so it's going to
Yeah,
go completely left, huh?
yeah. I mean, if you're looking for somebody who is a little bit moderate to the right, conservative, to offer those perspectives, Roger's your guy. Luce is very much going to bring a perspective of diversity, and she's a Latina, and she's going to bring that, and she's a parent, and that's really good. But most of the time, she's probably going to fall in line with Stuart Kasdan and Kyle Richards and James Kiriakou and Paula Perotti. Probably going to be a lot of 5-0 votes. I mean, it mostly is 5-0 votes now, but if there is a one, it is Roger who is the no. And it'll be a little bit sad. I think, I'm not calling it for Luce right away, but I think she's definitely the front runner. It's going to be an end of an era for Roger. Roger Aceves has never missed a meeting in 20 years that Goleta's
Wow.
been 21, I guess, or whatever it is, that's been a city. Never missed a meeting once. He loves it. He's kind of like this classic retired dude who is giving his public service to the community he loves. And we're going to lose one Latino for another. And I think if you're thinking big picture perspectives, you want diversity in that community to represent on the boards. But here we have district elections that's going to trade one for another. And I think that's the unfortunate thing.
Yeah. All right. And then, of course, the Indians never met a tax increase it didn't like. So is it measure A or measure C is the sales tax increase in Goleta?
I think that's B. Is it B? Yeah, the
Okay.
1%.
All
Yeah.
right. Yeah. So you think that's going to win? I mean, it's kind of a weird time. Inflation, people are worried about the economy or recession. How does that look?
Yeah, I don't know. Probably it's small, and there's a lot of people going to be voting. There's going to be large voter turnout. So I mean, I can see it passing, but I don't know. I haven't seen any polling. I don't really know what the buzz is on that. We are in a time of inflation, and things are not as looking as good as they were 6 months ago, a year ago financially. So I could see it, but I'm also seeing lots of turnout for this city council race, for the tobacco or the flavored vaping issue. People are going to turn out for that. So I think that, I don't know, it could pass. I'm a Goleta resident.
Yeah,
I
I
live
think if you know, if Luce gets the turnout, which she on the natural would with the party and Planned Parenthood and all of her other liberal credentials, that would probably help the tax increase. The other thing really interesting to me in politics this week was sort of the emergence of this of conservative movement, to the extent that there is one. You had this you had Justin Shores on your podcast, who is what is he a political consultant yet? Is he part of the that tribe, or what does he qualify
he,
as?
he is an enigma. He's very in an odd space. I had him on the show because I wanted him to talk about the world of conservatives, and he does not like the conservative Republican Party leadership. He feels as though they focus on national issues. So he's trying to be a support group or person for these candidates. He's very much in favor of Mike Stoker. He's working for him. I don't know if he's getting paid by him, but he's definitely working for him. Christy Lozano, he's working for. The candidate you had on your show and your forum, Effie Banales, he's helping her. So he's trying to fashion himself as this alternative conservative consultant to the Republican Party. He ran in 2020 and he felt as though the party did not support him. He ran for Goleta City Council. So he felt as though he didn't have that support. So he wants to support these candidates. So it's a bit of a mishmash, because on one hand, he talks about new kind of Republicans. We need somebody we can get behind to focus on issues, but then he is over there focusing on Mike Stoker and these kind of old guard conservatives who are trying to hold on to power or try to attain power again. And so it's a little bit of an interesting dynamic. But what he has tapped into is this quiet, silent group of people who do not like what's happening in schools with social emotional learning, with sex education, with diversity training. They feel as though those issues are hurting young people, and they want students to be focused on math and English. And so they're not the majority by far. They are the minority in Santa Barbara, but they do have a voice and they do have a platform. And so he's trying to tap into that to try to win, build up momentum. He wants to be a consultant, and maybe he'll run again for something down the road. But he's not the darling of the Republicans. There are Republicans who will say, Justin Shores, probably, we don't want you as our mouthpiece. And then there are others who are saying, yeah, go for it. He took a 3-month sabbatical to focus on the elections from his job.
Well, and the other thing is particularly with the push in the schools, a lot of that came before because of the pandemic, both first on the shutdowns and then the masks and then the vaccines, which I guess Justin spent a lot of time railing against at the Santa Barbara School Board. And then we had this group this week, the California Parents Union. I have to admit, I've not heard of that previously, but they had their own forum to which I was not invited. I don't know if you were. And many of the aforementioned conservative candidates were there to the exclusion of anybody else. Is that aligned with Justin? Is that sort of a separate wheel going off? Is that Fechner? What is that?
I don't know. I did not get an invite, and I don't think that the media did get an invite. I think they were advertising it and it was published.
But you guys had a story about it.
Yeah, so we found out about it, just sort of like we saw it on social media.
Sorry,
Gianna
guys.
saw it, and Nick.
Amen.
And so, yeah, a reporter covered it, and it was just a lot of conservative energy in the same room, sort of talking to each other. So I don't know who's behind that group. I don't know. And I'm sure Justin Shores is involved. I know Finkner's involved with Christy Lozano's campaign and the others. There's these splinters of conservatives who think they can kind of be puppet masters for these candidates, and it is quite entertaining, quite frankly, to watch them do these sort of things. The big no-no, if to give the free advice to them, is never cut off media, never try to set the terms for what media can and can't do in terms of accessing you. The best thing you can do is befriend the media, and you have another path, free path to get your message out. And when you cut them off, it sort of says you're not a legitimate, serious candidate.
What are we talking about?
Well, we were talking, first we started talking about your endorsements.
Oh, good.
Which we found surprising only in the person of Luz Reyes Martin over Roger Aceves. You cut the OG Luz this time out. And Josh was saying he thought that was going to be a huge, well, not huge, but a big deal for Luz. Did you consider Roger or what? You've endorsed Roger in the past, right?
We know Roger from like forever. I knew Roger when he was a hostage negotiator with the city of Santa Barbara Police Department. I like Roger. But you know, it's sort of you have Roger and Luz. You have I mean, Roger is sort of the old school curmudgeon, knows everybody in town, has connections like nobody's business.
Would you say that he's the Nick Welsh of the Goleta City Council?
Yeah, that's right. He's a Nick Welsh. But the question was really is, is he more a contrarian in the mold of, this is a bad analogy, but it's as good as I can come up with in a second. Peter Adam on the Board of Supervisors, or Peter Adams' successor, Bob Nelson. And Bob Nelson is just as conservative as Peter was, but he engages in the discussion and the process in a less sort of obstructionist way or contrary way than Peter did. And, the concern was I had, particularly with losing somebody like Roger, is that if you have homogeneity of ideological thought on the council, things get toxic in a weird way. And you don't get the questions asked. And I had serious concerns about that, and other people here did too. But it's sort of like, how do you engage in the argument, and how do you engage in the debate? And sort of collectively, we came to the decision that, it was more about saying no for saying no's sake too much than, but that was the collective wisdom that we came out with.
And
the only thing, Nick, that I would say is that the editorial, Luz was asked to run for the seat that Laura Capps is going to take over, and I think she made a strategic decision to not challenge Laura, because she probably would have been, it would have been close. It would have been tough. And to go against Laura Capps you're going to lose, unless you're Doss Williams or somebody like that. So I just think, that was sort of, there's no mention of that, that was the plan, and then it wasn't the plan. And then she went for this, and so I don't know. Did you give that any consideration? I'm sure you heard those that she was highly sought after.
We've heard the rumors, and it was just sort of really where we were focused on is given where, I mean, really, for us, we did we came up with a litmus test, which was, are you for or against the Measure B, the sales tax increase? And really, I don't think you can get there from here if you're against it. And Luz was agnostic, and she was a little bit squishy. She, stepped aside and let the voters decide. But Roger wrote the ballot argument against it. And given the fiscal demands on the city, I just thought, if you don't have that money, you're screwed. I thought the proponents of the sales tax increases, what do they say? It's 50 cents extra on a $50 dinner. you know, made a pretty strong case as to how so much of Goleta's sales tax is shortstopped by the county of Santa Barbara in the so-called revenue neutrality agreement that gave birth to the city. And Roger, he wrote the language against it, and Rowse was not against it. So that was where we came out there. On the other race, you have two appealing candidates in different ways, but you had Sam Ramirez saying, "Not now. This isn't. We haven't exhausted all administrative remedies," which I didn't find convincing at all. And you have James Ferracco, who supported it. So that was sort of how we came down.
Yeah. And then, so next week, you got more endorsements. I assume we're going to see more of the school board stuff.
You'll see something.
All right. I mean, the school board boards is where the action is.
It's like such a shotgun blast.
Say again?
It is such a shotgun blast. I mean, you got to give the conservatives credit. They've got a lot of candidates out there.
Yeah, we were just talking about that. The other thing that was weird in the culture wars of education this week, a little bit, was this incident in the Hope School District. I forget which school it was, but where
Monta Vista,
right? Where certain persons showed up with semi-pornographic material taken from a book, and they were trying to tell people what was going on there, Josh.
Oh, so it was Thomas Cole, the father of Charles Cole, who ran for assembly, right? Made it to the final. And then it was, I was told, Mickey Hamill, who is a conservative activist in Goleta. There was another person who I don't know. And they were distributing flyers on campus at Monta Vista. And basically with a list of Democrats saying these candidates support, I think, this is not exact, but, child porn or something porn, in schools. And, it had Fran Wagnick's name and,
Greg Hart's name.
Greg Hart's name, every Democrat there. And the images were like, if you don't want people to be looking at this stuff, then why would you show them this stuff? That's the biggest, irony. And it was I don't know how to describe it here, but it was two men engaging in the sexual act, right? That was what it was. And it was from a graphic novel. And I talked to Ann Hubbard, who's the principal of Monta Vista, and she said that we don't use Santa Barbara Unified School District teen talk materials. We're an elementary school. We don't have this book in our library. And by the way, this book is not a textbook. They were saying
it doesn't have anything to do with the curriculum.
It was clearly a gang who couldn't shoot straight event. It was.
But why there and why now?
They were attacking the wrong nation. So I mean, this was a library book in the Santa Barbara High School library. It's not a textbook. It is not in the Hope School District, and none of the individuals blasted and the accompanying text had anything to do with it being in Santa Barbara High School. The arguments where it kind of sort of makes sense why they went after the Hope School District, which is sort of is that the son of of one of the people involved had been involved in a disciplinary action that had been overseen by Fran Wagnick, who is running for the Hope School District and used to serve, just recently stepped down from her position as a,
So it was aimed at Fran primarily?
So they deny it, but the only thing that makes sense is that Fran is running for district, the Hope District Board. She was the one who was involved in the disciplinary action. So they took it. The other thing is that it was called as a Pride Week. It was like School Pride Week. It was like, so they took that as like, oh, does that mean it's like gay pride? It was just.
But they told them to wear green. They didn't tell them to wear red.
Here's the deal. It seems that the cultural conservatives, there's a meme going out, right? It's a national meme. Pornography in the schools. I think Mike Stoker is taking Greg Hart on about something about pornography in the schools. Maybe I'm not remembering that precisely, but there is this cultural meme, porn in the schools, and it's the liberals and the Democrats support it, and we're opposed. And this just shows the contortions to which they were willing to go and shred the truth or accuracy in order to conjure one up where one did not exist.
Yeah.
It was sort of, I thought, from my political vantage point, reassuring that the boogeyman is so inept.
And Fran Wagnick's running for the board, but it's district elections in the Hope School District too. So that school is not even in the district that Fran is running for. And it goes back to like what Nick said, it's if you're gonna like try to do this, try to do it well. Don't be so sloppy, because they ended up, the police were called, they had to go across the street, police talked to them and said, you can't come on and distribute information without permission. And so it ends up looking just really amateurish and embarrassing. And these people who are trying to like protect our kids are actually traumatizing people by creating some huge event out of it. Like they took a graphic novel out of the library at a public school and took it to where elementary school kids are. How is that a reasonable, mature approach to talking about whatever things you're concerned about?
Yeah, I thought Jean Yamamura had a very good story on this.
Yeah, she did a great job.
Looking more background, it was really in depth. But to me, the most shocking thing in Jean's story was to see Nick Masuda being quoted as a spokesperson for the Santa Barbara. I thought he just left. What's going on there? I first I
Speaking
thought,
of triggering,
I'm sorry.
the last time I talked to Nick Masuda, he told me he was a consultant. He was working as an independent contractor until they found a new permanent director of communication. So I guess he helps out with canned
But
quotes.
Barbara wasn't. I thought Barbara Kiani was making a great comeback there.
I think that lasted about 3 or 4 days.
I'm missing. I've missed the meeting on this thing, obviously. All right. In other news, we had the 5-2 vote at the city council on the parklets, which was not enough to satisfy Mayor Randy Rowse, who really is on the warpath about this thing. I mean, he said, what are we agreeing to here? To different color paint, and that's basically what they did do, isn't it?
Well, they have a long list of guidelines that these parklet owners have to comply with, but I think the biggest thing was, you got to paint it a certain color. You got to make sure that underneath it's free of debris. You can't have the rails higher than 48 inches. And this can go on this way for up to 5 years. And I think
there's also a rent agreement part of it as well, so that the city will be getting paid more rent now.
Oh yeah, like $800,000 a year or something.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. And I think the finance committee is going to be talking about that as part of their motion. But yeah, Randy was very grumpy. I mean, here's a guy who a lot of times he's trying to move the meeting along and he is trying to facilitate. And he actually just said, hey, Santa Barbara has not had more restaurant business. We've just concentrated it all to one block. And he said, retail, you better hope retail survives because we all need retail. And then he said, they want their Santa Barbara back.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Well, Randy has certain points, and where he makes sense, and he has, but it's sort of like, do you get rid of the parklets in the meantime? And I think he has.
Is that what he wanted to do?
I don't think he would ever say that, but I mean, I think he has talked about having selective parklets. So there are certain places where there aren't any restaurants, and so why not allow vehicles on certain stretches of State Street? So it would be more gaps of parklets, and then
why did Eric Friedman vote with him? What was Eric's perspective on
Well, Eric agreed with a lot of what was said in the motion, but he said he had a problem with approving a condition on these guidelines for the outdoor dining furniture for such a long, indefinite period of
Yeah,
time.
that is goofy. He's
Yeah,
right.
He
I
said,
mean,
I mean, when all this, there's definitely the goalposts have been moved. And nobody's trying to, it's not bait and switch, it just things take longer. The supposition originally was we figure out some interim fix and that would take about a year. And at the end of the year, we'd have some long-term plan for what's going to happen to State Street. Well, guess what? That
we're
long-term
not going to have a
plan,
long-term plan for years.
it's going to take a lot longer than people thought. So we're going to have this interim thing a lot longer. And Randy does have a point. It's not, if you look at the health of State Street or the lack of it, restaurants are only one indicator. And, if you're looking for pants or if you're looking for retail, there are other problems going on. The question is, I don't know. I mean, I hear Randy, I feel Randy, but I don't know that this is the right approach. I think.
Well, and the other thing is, if you look at the bed tax revenues, which were way over budget, coming in, it doesn't look like people are avoiding Santa Barbara because of the parklets by any stretch of the imagination.
People do say the parklets look a little ratty, even people who love them. And I think this will take the fact that you can get underneath and clean it. I think this will make it look like you got a shave and a haircut.
Yeah.
Randy said it looked like the county fair, which I thought was
He's got that
hilarious.
line. It's a great line. It's like, you want to be at the county fair on Friday night, maybe Saturday, but you don't want to wake up there Monday morning.
That's pretty good. All right, Nick, as you predicted, the Supreme Court's ruling a few months ago in that New York concealed carry case has led to a plethora of applications to Sheriff Bill Brown for concealed carries. And what's he doing about it?
Well, he's doing what he can. They have two people who are assigned to processing these applications. He's gotten about 125 applications for concealed weapons permits since June. The city of Santa Barbara, Lompoc Police, Santa Maria Police, and I think the Guadalupe Police Department have also gotten their own, and I don't have numbers for that. What you can't ask anymore is, why do you want them? What sort of special safety considerations are you dealing with? Are you like a jewelry store owner and you're worried about getting jumped? Are you a judge worried about getting jumped? I did talk, however, to one applicant who may or may not, they have 90 days in which to process it, and they're not going to make the 90-day deadline. It's just there's too many, and you have to go through you have to write an autobiography of yourself. You have to get 3 people who will write character attestations.
So that's still the case, or
You
that
still
was
need that. You have to go, there's only one psychologist, Dr. Katz in Ventura County, that you have to go to take a battery of like 500 question tests. And based on all this and a Department of Justice review of your record, they'll decide whether you get it or not. Now, I heard 3 people have got denied. One point that I forgot to mention or didn't mention in the story is that shortly about the time of the Supreme Court ruling, there was a big leak. The Department of Justice, there's a big data breach, and all about this stuff, concealed weapons data breach. So the Sheriff's Department said, we had to wait 2 months to get information on people from the Department of Justice. So there was a 2-month delay from the Department of Justice getting the information. And so there's a lot of processing. What I was told, though, is that this one guy told me, he said, yeah, I was asked why I needed the concealed weapon.
Since the
He said,
court
and
decision?
he said the way the conversation went was, he said, you're not allowed to ask me that. And they said, we know that. We're not going to withhold your permit because of what your answer is. We just want to know why you want it.
Well, you guys look forward to covering meetings when everybody walks in packing in the next few months. It's going to be really, really great.
I'm never going to be able to go to a Santa Barbara Unified School Board meeting again. Oh my goodness.
Thanks God for Zoom.
All right, and then lastly, Josh, the only institution you hound more than Hilda Maldonado is Chick-fil-A. And apparently you've gotten results with your reporting on how everybody was really angry about the traffic backups on the State Street in the line. And everybody loves Chick-fil-A now, huh? I mean, not the food, but the
Well, Chick-fil-A swooped as soon as the city said we're going to declare you a public nuisance. They fixed it almost overnight. They hired security. They hired people to be in the parking lot to direct traffic and move it along. And then they came out with this huge plan for creating 3 lanes out there. So I don't think there's a big line. Every time I'm in that area, I don't see it anymore.
I don't see it anymore either.
So they've really fixed the problem, and then they've come back with even more. And so that was the ABR who basically they swiftly approved it. Like, we're over this. It looks good. Go ahead and do it. And now it's going to be even more people going to Chick-fil-A, but they're not going to be, lingering out into the street. So I don't know if who that's a win for, or if that's a loss. If people are just glad that the traffic is gone, or if they really wanted Chick-fil-A out, but Chick-fil-A is here to stay.
I think that's a big victory for Rebecca Bjork, the city's new manager, CEO. That was one of the first things that she had to tackle upon being sworn in as top dog. And she just said, hey, do it or else. And there have been all sorts of pretty please and hubbada, and nothing happening before that. And she just said, do it or else. And all of a sudden, Chick-fil-A found religion.
So to speak.
They
already found it, man.
Closed on Sunday.
They were born again.
Yeah.
And they learned that
yes,
security.
on Prop 8. Yeah. Yeah.
So, I had Chick-fil-A way back in the day, and I still don't know what all the fuss is about. It's sort of like the chicken sandwich equivalent to Coors beer. When you grew up on the East Coast, Coors beer had this incredible mystique.
Yeah, but there were only like 2 beers at that. I mean,
and it was so bad.
In the West, yeah.
And Chick-fil-A, it just doesn't live up to the hype. But they as somebody who rides that stretch of road on my bike a fair amount, I'm mindful of the traffic jams, and much better.
All right. All right. So Nick, next week we'll see more endorsements from you. We got a community college board, and
we'll be looking at the school boards. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll be looking forward to that. And Josh, what do you got going this week?
I have some more housing stories that are coming up. There's also a vacation rental ordinance that the city's going to be tightening up and creating. So I'm going to be writing about that. And then I'm currently in negotiations with Emily Zacharias to be on my podcast. We've decided we're going to do it. We're just nailing down.
So your people are talking to her people. Is that the way?
Yeah, through Instagram. It's deep, intense negotiations right now on a time, Saturday or Sunday.
And she's running. Who's she running against? Carolyn?
Christy Lozano.
Oh,
yeah, she's running against Christy
her.
Lozano.
Okay.
And I think there might be a third candidate in there. Nick would probably know. Caroline's running against Richard Mayer, who's an incumbent.
Right.
Oh,
Carolina Bay. But the interesting thing, I believe, with Christy Zacharias and Emily Zacharias and Christy Lozano, is that they live in the same apartment complex. And apparently, when Christy Lozano was running against Susan Salcido, Zacharias had posted in the front yard of the complex a big Susan Salcido sign, which didn't go over well.
All right, thanks, guys, and we'll be back in town next week, and we'll have more on the election and all the other stuff that's going on in Santa Barbara. Take care, have a good weekend. We'll talk to you soon.
Yes,
Thank you.
indeed.